happening in this crazy world today. A lot of interesting stuff. Some stuff might affect things like this platform, just for people to publish videos and all that. I guess the first interesting one is in relation to all that drones and banning Chinese-made ones, like in the US. It was kind of interesting reading this one. This one says, McSally introduces bill to prohibit use of taxpayer funds for Chinese drones. It says U.S. Senator Martha McSally on Thursday introduced legislation to prohibit the use of federal funding to purchase drones manufactured in communist China or by Chinese state-owned companies. The bill, Securing Our Skies Against Chinese Technology Act 2020, would require U.S. private entities and state local governments to certify they are not using Chinese drones in order to receive federal funds. It says, quote, at a time when federal agencies are banning or grounding Chinese drones based on cybersecurity concerns, China is now donating them to state and local law enforcement across the United States, McSally said. This is just another part of China's ongoing effort to exploit the global pandemic that is unacceptable. We should not risk giving China the chance to spy on Americans amid our efforts to combat the coronavirus. My legislation is a common sense step towards exposing communist China's real intentions and shoring up our national security. So it's one of those again, I guess, in terms of every Chinese product has some kind of, spying element or government control, so they don't want to use them for official government agency types of work. I'm still curious how this will work, because almost all of the big drone manufacturers that a lot of the authorities use, they're all Chinese made. I know a lot of people, they think even people like Autel is 100% American. They're not. They're actually owned by a Chinese company too. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this actually goes about. Speaking of coronavirus stuff, I know for here, like in Vancouver, the city said they were going bankrupt, so they need money basically to maintain everything. It was kind of interesting reading this though. This one says, the wrong message. Vancouver cuts sanitation funding, hires $95,000 social media staffer. A Vancouver City Councilor says the city needs to reassess its priorities after it cut funding for street cleaning to hire a new social media staffer for the city's manager's office. Sarah Kirby-Young says the city had budgeted more than $300,000 to improve sanitation and street cleaning this year, but in its quest to balance the budget amid COVID-19, council voted to slash that by $125,000. At the same time, the city is now budgeting $95,000 to hire the city manager's social media manager. Try wrapping your head around that, huh? Basically, you're getting rid of, areas and departments where you would argue that is one of the most important things during this time. But yeah, $95,000, man. What are you doing there as a social media manager? Holy smokes. During this time, can't you just outsource this? If it's based on things social media, tourism, trying to show the city, can't you just ask the public for help for that? Wow. It made me think how a lot of you have said before, where when you see things like my drone footage at times, it makes you want to visit the area as a tourist. For $95,000, holy cow! Is that what the social media manager is doing? Just making, the city look good with pictures and all that? I don't even need $95,000 to do that, jeez. Now granted, the person probably needs some tech skills, for example, which is understandable, but yeah, during this time, it just got a little mind-boggling why they would hire that type of position for that amount of money when they say they have no money left, so to speak. And with the thought of social media, this one was so fascinating, what's happening in the US. A lot of times people say a lot of platforms will suppress certain information. They don't like someone's opinion or something like that, then they'll block them, etc., etc. Well, this one here says, Trump signs order that could punish social media companies for how they police content, drawing criticism and doubts of legality. President Trump on Thursday signed an executive order that could open the door for federal regulators to punish Facebook, Google, and Twitter for the way they police content online, issuing a major broadside against Silicon Valley that quickly triggered wide-ranging political opposition and threats of legal challenge. So I just had to find out, what was this about? And I was like, oh no, politics. Again, I usually stay away from that stuff. It says here it deals with, mail-in ballots and how he was saying it increases fraud. It says here, there is no way, zero, that mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged, and even illegally printed out and fraudulently signed. The governor of California is sending ballots to millions of people. Anyone? So I think it's kind of like those scenarios where sometimes they say mail-in ballots have names of people who are deceased, for example, who don't actually qualify, versus if you have something in person, then they have to be there. You can verify their identity and so forth. So when he posts stuff like that, you can see on the bottom there's like a little notice. I guess Twitter tries to fact check stuff. A lot of people are doing that, like Facebook and YouTube and all that. And it says here, get the facts about mail-in ballots. And when you click on the link, it basically links to this article. It says Trump makes unsubstantiated claim that mail-in ballots will lead to voter fraud. And apparently is it by CNN here? Because it says photo via CNN Politics. And it basically tells you stuff like here, Trump falsely claimed that mail-in ballots would lead to a rigged election. However, fact checkers say there is no evidence that mail-in ballots are linked to fraud. Trump falsely claimed that California will send mail-in ballots to anyone living in the state, no matter who they are or how they got there. In fact, only registered voters will receive ballots. And then it says 5 states already vote entirely by mail, and all states offer some form of mail-in absentee voting, according to NBC News. So there, it seems like it's different sources and stuff like that too. So I guess ultimately it comes down to, should companies have the right to do this? First of all, I guess that's the legal challenge, because if they're a private entity and all that, then technically they should be able to do what they want. That's what they say anyways. And at the same time, in terms of who is the authority on the truth, how do you determine that? For example, like, I don't know, people always say it. Like, I know a lot of Americans, they say things like places like CNN or whatever, they say, oh, they fabricate this, etc., etc. So should they be relied upon as an authoritative source, and how do you determine that? I think that would be the biggest controversy if you're using like a system like this. I guess an interesting way to think about it would be like that story yesterday I talked about, the one where the person was essentially murdered by the police officer, and there's a lot of people in the black community outraged about it. If you imagine there, with this algorithm or the way it works, like I guess, kind of like that Twitter thing, for the official police report, that would probably be linked as the fact checker, so to speak, because it's an official source. Whereas someone just randomly uploading that actual video that showed you what really happened, that probably would be way below somewhere, because it's not, I guess, the authoritative source that you trust as the truth. So like there, is that necessarily the best way to deal with it in terms of like, I guess, fact checking? Because many times the media and stuff, they do get it wrong too, whereas it is the real people who actually get the real information out there, so to speak. Now granted, there are certain people who publish stuff that are completely fake, for example, so questionable, but at the same time, I guess the debate is, should you let those people, I guess, do it and hope people are educated enough to realize, hey, this doesn't add up when they read all the other sources, or no, like, should you block everything out like that as well? I still remember that funny example where, remember when they came out with those drone interim laws here in Canada, and all the mainstream media, they were using things like that fake video of the drone crashing into the airplane wing, cutting through it like knife through butter. It was completely fake, but they pass it off as real, and you see all the people, like the mainstream people, like, oh my god, get rid of this stuff, it's not dangerous, even though it's fake. And then you guys gave me like the video of it, I published it and so forth, and then a lot of you guys also wrote into them saying, this is fake, take it down. They issued, I guess, a private like retraction to people apologizing for it, but they never said anything publicly saying, oops, like this is completely fake. Like there, ultimately, that's the one that's gonna stick in people's minds. Imagine there, like a bunch of people just writing in their tweets or whatever saying, hey, this drone footage or whatever is completely fake. And then underneath all their messages would be something saying like, I don't know, here's a fact checker. The CBC says this is real and this is what can happen. Like there, it would be horrible, right? Like a disaster. So yeah, I don't know how necessarily you can determine who is the official source that gets it right 100% of the time, in this case anyways. I'll be surprised if it actually sticks, because it just sounds like so much legalities there in terms of why it wouldn't be applicable. Oh man, I think there was a lot of bug casualties in this fight. Ugh, gross. I do find actually bugs and small birds are more attracted to the small drone, whereas with the bigger one, they tend to, I guess, stay away. Guess it makes sense, right?
There's 11. 3, 7, 8, 9 babies.
Alright, see you guys later.